My name is Mary Amanugian, and I'm the director of the Center for Women's Business Advancement here at Southern New Hampshire University. And I know I say this a lot, but I really have one of the best jobs in the whole state. And for one of the reasons why is I get to participate and engage in events like this here at Southern New Hampshire University. And it is such a wonderful place to work here, in part because they embrace so many different styles of learning, whether it's our online program or university campus, College for America, or the School of Business's Degree in 3 program. I appreciate working in an environment where leadership is such that they really want to help people learn and move along. So it's great to see people from the community. It's wonderful to see students and also my peers and faculty and staff. I've got to say, it was last April when Linda Johnson sent me an email, and she had sent me an article about how New Hampshire women business owners is on the rise in the state of New Hampshire. And she said, how would you like to collaborate on an event with me? And I just immediately replied, I'm all in. Which, not to say to my boss, Bill Gillett, who's the dean of the business school, that I'm a rogue kind of cowgirl that will just do whatever I want. But how could I not want to participate in an activity with Linda, who she herself is cool, but also to be able to collaborate with the McLean law firm. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. This started when Linda obviously contacted me. We had a conversation. She pulled in Susan Damari, thank you very much, as well as Ariel Wilson, who's one of our grad assistants here at the university. And I'm grateful for Susan and Ariel because I think they helped rein Linda and I in, because this just kind of kept growing into an amazing and powerful opportunity. And for the women who are our panelists this evening, I can't tell you how much we sincerely appreciate all of your efforts. The constant emailing, you completed surveys, you participated in a roundtable discussion on January 14th, at which we were asked, Linda was probing you with some very good questions, and you were very forthright and candid in your answer. And in part, it was to just think about what's, leadership for females in New Hampshire, what's that all about, what does it mean? And what's been interesting in this journey, and I hope you agree, Linda, is that it's not a direct path, leadership, and that it's for, you all have taken your own path, but what you have said in a resounding manner is that it has to do with your ethics and staying true to yourself and your core values that have helped to propel you along the way. Our hope is that as you have this opportunity this evening, that you also identify the leader within you and you feel comfortable and confident as you walk out the door tonight to just implode with your leadership attributes and abilities. Because if anything I've learned from these brilliant women in the front row here, it's that we all have the opportunity to be leaders from within. We unfortunately couldn't share with you the entire January 14th discussion and conversation. So what we've done, and I've got to say thank you to Ariel Wilson, our grad assistant, as well as Matt Wood, who's our intern at the Center for Women's Business Advancement. They've done a video montage that we're going to share with you this evening. Then the second part of that is we're going to just start with some Q&A. Linda's going to start the conversation going with our panelists, and Amy Rodman, who's our business advisor at the Center for Women's Business Advancement, is going to have a roving mic. So you'll have an opportunity to ask questions if you'd like. And also, and those of you who know me and know me well, we're getting tech savvy this evening. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to a mic, you can tweet in your question to us. And I know, like I'm supposed to do that. You'll have and you can have your question posed that way. So really our intent for this evening is just to make you all as comfortable as possible and to ask as many questions so that you can start defining your own leadership journey. And with that, we're going to watch the video. Thank you.
as you probably see by looking around the room, we have CEOs and presidents. We have women from for-profit companies and not-for-profit organizations. We have people of all ages and diverse backgrounds. So I suspect you're imagining what exactly is going to go on today. And you know that you each filled out a pre-forum survey. So tonight we're going to talk about your questions and your responses. And it is our hope that by sharing the stories that you have, that you'll be able to offer guidance to the next generation of women leaders, or to any woman who's making her way through her career. So,
I love what I do, and you know, we have a therapeutic preschool, and I have a picture of the first graduating class, and there are like 12 of them, and they're lying on a parachute, and with the picture, and it's up in my office, and that's what gets me to work every day. And when it gets really difficult, I'll just go up to Lake Ave and I'll go visit the kids that are in there. I think that definitely it's all about my heart. I mean, I love, you know, making a living and being able to take care of my own kids, but I love going to work and knowing that we're doing the next right thing for kids. And definitely that is why I go to work every day.
exactly.
I would just say though, if there wasn't something about it that spoke to you, that didn't make you happy, that didn't give you something back, you wouldn't continue to do it.
I would have found that somewhere
You'd have found
else.
it somewhere
though.
else.
I would have found it almost anywhere else.
So it's still, for me, it still speaks to a passion. No matter what you're doing, there's something about it that speaks to something in you that has to do this. You know, whether it's like you say, you know, helping people or whatever that platform is. It's not necessarily the platform, but what the platform gives you, or through that platform what you can do.
So I agree with what you were saying, which is you have to be yourself. If you're not yourself, no matter how good you are, there's always going to be doubt. Because there's this sort of discomfort, and that discomfort's going to create doubt. And doubt is a shackle, and it drags you down, and it doesn't sink you like a stone in a day, but it slowly starts to pull you, and it slows you down. And so if you're not yourself, you're going to hold yourself back, and you do have to believe. And I know there are a lot of people who say lean in, and I agree, but I think what doubt does is it keeps your head down, and I think you need to look up. And I don't know how you do that unless you're being yourself, because there's just too much to be afraid of, and that's the real problem for young women.
And I feel, especially for those of us whose careers have been pretty much based on opportunities that were presented to us, if you think about it, opportunities aren't presented to people that are perceived as negative energy takers. You know, it's sort of like, it's kind of obvious, but you know, I always tell people, we all have a brand, whether we know it or not. You do, whether you pay attention to it and develop it, or it just happens. And if you're perceived inside an organization as a problem solver, an energy giver, somebody who's going to add positivity to the team, not bring the team down, then things tend to take care of themselves. So I think it's just such common sense. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm talking like someone's mother when I'm mentoring or coaching them on this, because it is such common sense. Be yourself, be optimistic, be a realist, don't expect perfection, but do look for the good. And you know, it's such basic stuff, but if you ask me what it really boils down to, I would say that. And EQ, emotional, recognize, you know, I'd rather take a few extra points of EQ over a few extra points of IQ any day of the week.
True.
But to that point, I don't know what choices people will make, but if I were to give a young woman advice, I would say that if you have to divert your career for a period of time, for whatever reason, children, health, something, that's not getting off the path. Life is not linear, and that every place where you are, every single place, your difficulty with the grant, everything is a learning opportunity. And if you see it as a learning opportunity, later on in your career, you can leverage that learning. Things that we've learned in places far outside our career come into our career decisions because they've informed our decision-making strategies. And that can happen if you're at home working with kids or if you're volunteering for the PTA. Everything is a learning opportunity and it can be leveraged. I would say some of my best successes in my own hiring have been people who've stayed at home for a while and come back, because they come back with energy and education and maturity in decision making that I think they must have garnered by being good parents.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because when I think of passion, I'm with Diane that, banking's not passionate about it, but passionate about being successful at whatever job I had. I always felt passionate, like, I'm going to show them I can do this. I'm not going to let the team down. So that passion is
About
Yeah.
success.
But it's amazing with the career path how many lives you touch, and over the years how that comes back to you. Like one example, George Pataki was just here. I interviewed him years and years and years ago in Albany, New York, when he signed Megan's Law into law. And it was a big media scrum, and I'm a short woman, and New York reporters are really, really vicious and can be brutal, and they're elbowing you out of the way. And he saw me kind of struggling, and he came over and answered my questions. So,
good for you.
so now when you see him, it's just kind of a nice reminder from almost 20 years ago. But
years in the high-tech space, and then I think, as Diane said, you see an opportunity and just move to that next opportunity. And I guess back then, as long as you worked hard, and you were persistent in your goals, and you were focused in what you wanted to do, and you were determined, it seemed like there was opportunity to grow. And I took advantage of that. And so I just moved from management, to director, to VP, and then after being there for 12 years, I had little kids as well. I just said, it's a lot. And probably like everybody here, I didn't really like working for anybody, so I thought, I think I'll give it a shot and try my own business. So I decided to start this agency out of my home.
So my path is very roundabout, but I think at every step of the way for me, it's always been not a passive activity, but rather a stepping into my future and saying, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I'll just give a really quick example and I'll wrap it up. I remember when I interviewed for my job at the large law firm in Boston, and I was terrified. I was only the second year. But they called and they offered me this amazing job at the oldest law firm in Boston, so how could I turn that down? So I went down for the interview, and I remember the partner there saying, you'll be responsible for all the due diligence on our major deals. And I said, great, sign me up, I can do that. And I left saying, what the hell is due diligence? Part of it's not, none of it's rocket science. We're all smart, we can figure these things out. So don't be afraid to take that leap and just go.
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's really hard, because you're put in, especially, when you're managing people and you're responsible to a board of trustees and you're responsible for the bottom line and separate from the service that you're delivering. I've always worked in the nonprofit sector. It requires a kind of a clarity and a mental toughness about really what your job is. And I'm a middle child. I want everybody to kind of work it out, and so and sort of have a lot of values that came from childhood experiences and that kind of thing that I think in many ways make it a challenge for me to be a boss. And so finding the way that I can do the tough pieces and be authentic has been a real process for me. And finally, I think I'm pretty good at being me in my job. But it's been work. But it's something that I've been aware of from the very beginning of doing the kind of work that I do.
All right, well, thank you to all those brave ladies who came on that night of January 14th, which happened to be my birthday, so it was the best birthday party ever. And I have to say, looking around here, I'm very thrilled that all of you have joined us this evening. The seed for this program came about some many years ago when I saw a program on television, which was the airing of a roundtable of some national women leaders talking about issues. And I've always thought, wouldn't it be great to get together a group of New Hampshire's women leaders and talk about where they got to, where they are today. So as chair of McLean's Diversity Committee, I spoke to the firm and said, hey, we have women's initiatives, could we do this? And as Marianne said, I called her up and said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And so here we are today. And when Marianne and I were talking, we didn't know what would come from this. We didn't know, were there common themes? Did they share something in common? Did they all have a master plan that they knew what they wanted to do? Or did they take advantage of opportunities as they presented themselves? Did someone help them, or was it just all internally driven? And did they have obstacles or take risks? And then we made some calls. And so sitting in the front row are the brave women who agreed to join us today. So I'm going to call them up to join me on the stage, and I'm just going to call them alphabetically. We ask that you hold the applause because we have a lot to cover for tonight's program to get out on time. But we first have Maureen Beauregard, and she is the president and founder of Families in Transition. So she will join me. We have Jerry Ann Bogus, who is the director of the Portsmouth Black Heritage Trail. We have Tiffany Eddy, who is the owner of Focus First Communications, who you may remember from her Channel 9 days as a TV news reporter. We have Linda Fanaras, who's president of Millennium Integrated Marketing. Margaret Frankhauser, CEO of Central New Hampshire VNA and Hospice. Betsy Gardella, president and CEO of New Hampshire Public Radio, who I heard on the radio say that they did their fundraising in 3.5 days instead of 10, because probably from people like you in the room who managed to do it. So that was wonderful. We have Lisa Girton, who is the president of Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. Amy LaBelle, founder of LaBelle Winery. Sharon McCarthy, president of McLean Communications. Now, you also saw in the film Diane Mercier, who is the president of People's United Bank. She sends her regrets to everyone here, but unfortunately was feeling under the weather, so was not able to join us. Kathy Schmidt, CEO of my own, McLean, Graff, Rollison, and Middleton. And as Marianne said at the outset, this was really a two-part series that we asked these women to participate in. The first part was coming together for that round table that you saw, and it's really unfortunate that you couldn't see the whole thing. I was actually humbled and amazed and inspired by everything that they had to say about their career transition. They did fill out a pre-event questionnaire about their path and their career ascension and leadership opportunities. And to give you some backdrop to really, I think, appreciate what they have accomplished, I did get some statistics on women in business. And I found a fact sheet on the Women's Leadership Gap, Women Leadership by the numbers. So if you didn't know it, women make up 50.8% of the U.S. population and hold 52% of all professional level jobs. Yet despite this, they really lag behind in leadership opportunities. Nationally, only 14.6% are executive officers, 8.1% top earners, and 4.6% of Fortune 500 CEOs. When you look at each individual industry, the numbers, I think, are equally kind of sobering, whatever you want to say. In the healthcare industry and social assistance, 78% are the labor force, but only 14% of the executive officers are women. So if you look at each one, it's that. But somehow, this entire group managed to do it. And how did they do it? So to give you some background information about them that wasn't shown on the video, as you saw, they're a variety of ages. There's probably an age span up here of about 20 years. Marital status, mixed. But by and large, almost everybody up here has 2 children. So they either have 1, 2, or 3, but the magic number was 2 children. And most of the women here have advanced degrees, a master's or higher. Their career paths had some similarities and some differences. As Lisa Girton and Diane Mercier kind of took a linear in the insurance and banking industry. They
got an opportunity at a particular industry and made their ways up through the ranks to the top leadership positions in their organizations. Other people had more of doing different professions before they landed, and where's Betsy? Betsy Betsy wins the prize for the most diverse career path, and what she started off with, she ran a switchboard, she caned chairs, she taught preschool, she went to graduate school, she did volunteer work, and then actually had a career for a long time in the performing arts, theater primarily and arts education. And then in the mid-90s, and she took her first job in public radio and says she hasn't looked back since. Public media is now her home. Amy LaBelle, as you saw there for a clip, actually worked for a very high-powered law firm, and now she's a winemaker. And as she said, makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Others took job or career transitions based on family considerations. And Tiffany Eddy, who had this very prominent Channel News reporter, I would see her on the news, had young children, and she decided to start her own company, Focus First Communications, which gives her some greater flexibility to balance her professional and home life. And Linda Fanaris, likewise, you saw that she had made her way. She got a degree in computer sciences with a minor in marketing, was in the tech world, and she had opportunities to move from management, director, VP, and likewise, when she had young children, said, you know what, I'm going to start my own business. And I suspect that was also in part for some of that flexibility. So although you heard some of the quotes, I pulled a couple more that in that evening, and when I looked back at the video, I'm like, oh God, this is like a pearl of wisdom. So not to embarrass anybody here, but one of them was, don't we all work so that our lives can make a difference in some way? Isn't that really part of what it is to be human, to somehow make your existence on this earth matter for someone else? And that was Margaret Brankhauser said that. Diane Mercier, who wasn't here, spoke about the benefit of being optimistic and having a positive outlook. And she said, you know, you really find remarkable things and great kindnesses that you might have missed. Several people, including Kathy Schmidt, talked about, you know, although she had a whole career in the banking industry and then she came on to be the CEO at McLean, and she says, and I haven't looked back since. And so Lisa Gurton spoke, and others spoke about, they called it the happy accidents of their careers. You know, somebody recognizing them and giving them an opportunity. Dominant themes from the discussion that night were, as you can see, everyone has incredible energy and drive. They all work very hard to succeed to the best of their abilities. Many people said that they were actually provided with a growth opportunity because someone else in their company just recognized their good work and said, hey, can you do this other one? Several mentioned, and I think Amy as well, venturing into the next step, feeling like they had no qualifications whatsoever for the job that they were given, but knowing that they had a great curiosity, that they could learn, and that they would figure it out. That you needed to have confidence in yourself, and really kind of like true to yourself, knowing who you are. All of them also contribute in many ways to their communities. You know, their philanthropy. Lisa and I were at another event together last night, and we'll be at another event together soon. So what I would, and the other thing was, I asked the question about passion or perseverance, which is more important. And I love getting the looks like, that's a hard one. And I think predominantly everyone said you need both. Both of them are important. So for tonight's questions, I'm going to ask some questions that we didn't get to. Work-life balance, gender dynamics, mentorship, and is there anything unique about New Hampshire? And we hope that you all will likewise ask the questions that you have. Because Sharon was not able to join us for the taping, I'm going to pitch this first one to you on work-life balance and ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your own experience on work-life balance. Do you have it, and how do you manage it? It sounds like it. No.
We can hear you. It's really far.
Hello? Oh, that one's working.
Here's one.
How's this? Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you. And Yeah, I missed the tough part. I can see from the video that was more difficult than sitting here answering questions. So I'm a Libra, so balance is like, I'm all about balance. And I'll tell you, I find the balance, the work-life balance, easier with kids. I had kids later in life at 40 and 44 years old, so I have a 5 and a 9-year-old. So the first 20 years that I worked, I didn't have children, and all I did was work. I just worked and worked and worked and rode my bike a lot, and that was about it. And when you have other things in your life, balance becomes more important, and you figure it out. So at this point, for me, the balance piece is, I've learned that it does not come in any given day. Sometimes it doesn't come in a given week. But you have to pace it out. So like all of us, we go to events all the time. We're involved in a lot of things. And when I have like a 2-week stretch where I'm out 3 or 4 nights a week, I make sure I schedule the next 2 weeks to, be a little calmer so I can spend time with my family and have these 2 little girls that are like, why are you working so much? So there is that, and I mean that is a side effect of running a company. But the other piece of the balance is having something you really love to do and keeping that in your life, no matter what. For me, it's my yoga class, and it's even things like walking the dogs. I like a simple little thing like that. It's just a way to kind of, get that moment. So I don't think this is just women. I think men, women, students, we need to have that a piece of things we love, a piece of things we have to do, and try to work that out.
How about anybody else on work-life balance? I know having some, Lisa? Okay.
Sure. I thought a lot about this because you asked a question, do you have it? And I'm thinking, I don't know, because my life is the only one I know. This is normal to me, so I'm not sure I know the answer. But my answer would be yes, but I think of that, there's that story about if you put a frog in cold water and turn the temperature up 1 degree at a time, he'll stay in there till it boils and never hop out. Sometimes I think that's what... You don't know that story? No, has anyone... Raise your hand if you've heard that story. All right, thank you. Because it's just so gradual, and so I think sometimes if you could take a snapshot of my life now and what seems normal, and I had to answer that question as my 20-year-old self, I would say that's not work-life balance, but to me, it is. And I think I can say a couple of things. I think part of it's wiring. I work a lot of hours because that's what my job demands, but I'm not a workaholic. I'm not looking for reasons to work a lot of hours. If I need to, I do, and if I can walk away, I do. And I think that's important. I was once asked, to think about the question, do you work to live or do you live to work? And I think that's a legitimate question too. And work is a huge part of my life and what I do and who I am, but I definitely work to live, not the other way around. I think one of the things that, as I looked back and I thought about it, you have to take each chapter as it comes. So for years, my husband and I both worked full time, and then we had these kids. And when I had my first child, I did, take Fridays off, which if anyone's done that 4-day work week, that's a joke because you just work as many hours in 4 days as you used to in 5 days. But it made me feel better with this new little baby at home. And then as opportunities continued to come my way, including this one, to run the organization, something had to give. And so in my life, as unexpected as it was, my husband quit his job, became Mr. Mom, and all of a sudden I'm the breadwinner, which was so not part of the plan, but it made sense, and that's been our division of labor. So I think all anyone can do in a family unit or any kind of social unit is evaluate what's in front of you and figure out what's going to work at that point in time. I also think you have to draw the line in corporate America. The company will take every single thing you will give and more. So if you don't know when to say when, why would the company ever stop asking, right? We just kind of laugh about an anthem vacation, which means you're taking your conference calls from a prettier location. That's basically what it's like. But I try not to. I'll be on vacation next week, and I'm going to try really hard, to be reasonable about it, and learning to say no. For me, the hardest thing is, as Linda said, we're all involved in a lot of extracurricular, extra company things. But I have to say no to far more than I say yes to, and I feel guilty about it every single time. Will you run this heart ball? Will you do this? Will you do that? And you have to learn to say no. So I think that would be my perspective on work life.
Anybody else on work life or next question?
Yeah,
Betsy?
I'll just. I think as a manager of an organization, it's part of our responsibility to make sure that our staff feel that they have permission to say, I'm with my family this weekend, or I was told when I moved to New Hampshire that sports were that if my daughter was playing field hockey, that I was obligated to go to the game. And of course, she never played any sports, but I liked the idea of that, you know, that I have spent most of my professional career in New York City, and it's a really exciting, fantastic place to live, but work-life balance is like, what's that? And I think New Hampshire, it's a little bit more civilized, but I think we do all work an awful lot. So I guess the one thing that I want to say is just, as the manager, you set the tone. And if you give your team permission to take the time that they've earned, the vacation time that they've earned, or you're approving timesheets and you see somebody in 2 weeks has worked 108 hours, you need to go talk to that person because it's way too much.
Can I add something to that? Only, I see a lot of young people in the audience, so I'll tell you, I'm not from New Hampshire. And I came to New Hampshire in part because of work-life balance. I love to hike, I love to ski, and I just like to be outside. So for me, I came from Washington, D.C. This was a much more reasonable place to have work-life balance because that's the nature of New Hampshire. It's probably the nature of Vermont and Maine as well. It's not the nature of Washington, D.C. Now, that's not to say you don't start in a place where you're working all the time so you can get your experience. But for me, part of the reason I'm here, and by the way, I was in Washington this week. I did some lobbying in Washington. Part of the reason I'm here is because I can have that. And I can still catch a flight from Manchester to Washington when I need to be there. And in some ways, being from New Hampshire and coming to Washington is more valuable than having been in Washington and talking to other Washingtonians. So I think a little plug for places like New Hampshire. It's a great place to have that balance.
I think one of the things about work-life balance that I found is technology makes us so accessible all the time, and we have these little tethers that are called smartphones now that enable us to have that work-life balance in so many ways, because I can do work from anywhere now, anytime, but it's also important to remember to turn it off. And I think I was home one day in the kitchen and my son was asking me a question, and I was looking down at an email that had come in that absolutely had to be answered at that moment. Not really, but we put the kind of pressure on ourselves that we want to be attentive. We want to be attentive to our clients and to the people who we're doing business with, and we want to get back to them immediately because it says something about our work ethic and who we are. But I think it's also important, when he was asking me a question, I realized I wasn't making eye contact with him in the kitchen as we were cooking dinner, and I wasn't enjoying that moment that I had fought so hard to be able to experience with him and my daughter, that I put it down and put it away. And now I make a conscious effort that when we're doing our family time, that the cell phone and the computer, they're not there, and that we're engaging as real human beings where we're making eye contact and we're having conversations, and it's not about text messages and emails that come in, because there's going to be plenty of time and they're not going to stop, and there's going to be more and more of them. But I think it's just as perhaps with the young people in the audience, understanding that technology is wonderful and constantly evolving, but don't let it define who you are and how you live your life. Make sure that you're the one who controls it and that you're the one who tames it, and you make the decision.
I love Lisa saying about Anthem, like answering emails in a pretty place. I have to say, I just came back from a wonderful vacation with my adult children in Africa, and there was no internet access for 10 days, and it was marvelous. So I'd like to move on to gender dynamics, and I think it's hard to have a group of women leaders in front of us and not have the idea pass our minds of gender dynamics. Some people might say gender bias, and there seems to be a real pressure, maybe self-imposed, among women to really strive for excellence at all times in order to be considered, taken seriously in our jobs. And I think, Amy, it was you who answered your response about gender dynamics. You said that the world of wine is full of men, and you're often asked, oh, is this winery your father's? But that you overcome it, and you just don't think about it. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Do I need a microphone? Yes. Sorry. Will you pass me? Hi there. Yeah, you can hear me now. Okay. Yeah, so I've always worked in male-dominated fields. So when I practiced law, I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney. I was the only female member of a 23-member tax department at Sullivan and Worcester. So, you know, it's always been that way for me. Has it been a big issue for me? No. I always felt that I had to really knock my work out of the park in order to not be overly scrutinized or judged unfairly. So if anything, it made me work harder. But I would say that for me, I haven't paid much attention to it. And I would challenge the women in the crowd to you know, you can be aware of the fact that there might be some gender bias in the world, but I wouldn't give it a lot of my energy. So, you know, if you just focus on your own excellence, I think that the rest of everything falls away.
How about anyone else? Have you ever encountered any gender dynamics that impacts you positively or negatively? And when I say positively, I had the good fortune as a very new lawyer in New Hampshire in 1988 to be approached by the New Hampshire Bar Association officers who were all men, and they said, we've been in existence for 117 years and we've never had a woman officer, and we'd like it to be you. And I think it was because of what many of you answered. I was doing law-related education. I got involved as a young lawyer in lots of things, and they said, and we'll help you to get elected. So I did have the good fortune of being the first woman officer. So I think that was a place where gender assisted me, that someone recognized it and put it forward. It wasn't a negative. And did anyone else have any experiences, positive or negatively, about gender? Sharon?
This was a bad one that turned out to be a good one, but I was about in my late 20s and I was working for a newspaper, and I took the job as a salesperson with the understanding that when something opened up, I would be a manager, because I had come in as a manager and I had moved up here to New Hampshire. And a job opened up and I applied for it and had the same qualifications as the person who was leaving the job, and he was a great guy, great manager to me. And I applied and they interviewed other people, and I knew they would, and that was great, the best person should get the job. And a few weeks went by, and you know, I checked in and it was like, oh, we haven't decided. And so I went in, and this gentleman was in his early 60s at the time, and he ran the department. And he goes, well, sit down. And I'm like, okay. And he said, we're looking for an heir to the throne. And I was like, I had never, like you said, I never looked for that kind of thing. I never even thought of it. And I was like, what? Seriously? Because I'm not a guy. I actually said something a little worse than that I won't say right now. Because I knew I was really qualified and I had done a really good job, and I knew that I felt like the job really should have been mine. And he said, yeah, you know, we're looking for someone who can take my place someday. I'm like, why couldn't that be me? I'm a little confused right now, and I will tell you that if I don't get the job, I'm leaving. So you're going to be down 2 people instead of just 1. And I said it calmly, and I walked out, and my head was spinning. I had just never dealt with that before, and I got the job. And it was a real learning moment for this guy too, because we talked later, and it turned out I was pretty good at that job, and I ended up taking his job when he retired, and we became super close. And he just knew no other way. His generation grew up, you know, thinking that, you know, here I am in my late 20s, I'm going to have kids next year, I'm going to leave the job, I'm going to leave him in a lurch, and not that wouldn't have been wonderful, but that did not happen, and it worked out great, and it was really a learning experience for both of us. But it was the first time I ran into that so directly, and my response was just, you're kidding, right? So I would recommend, if that happens to any of you young women, and I hope it doesn't, because I feel like things have changed. I run into that so infrequently in any way now. In fact, I think as much is expected of me as it is any man in running a company or in any role. But it was an interesting experience for me.
Can I just add to that real quick? So, often when I'm in a meeting or at an event or doing anything, I'm often the only person of color or the only woman in there. And yes, I'm totally always aware of my role as either a person of color or a woman. And there are things that you notice about yourself and how you're just really particular about certain things. Like if I'm in a meeting and they're all men, and which I run a lot of meetings when I was at the University of New Hampshire, I was always asked to take the notes. And I said, no, I'm not the secretary, I'm not taking notes. They believe that. So there are particular things that I know that you would be looked upon to be doing this. And you're always the person, either as the woman in this group, that they just assign that role to you. And you have to be aware of those things, or else then you fall back into being that. Or if you're not aware, you just go ahead and move it. But we have to step up our own game when it comes to any of the isms so that we don't fall in that trap.
Right. I'm going to add to that. I'm so glad you said that. I think that whether it's a gender issue or a race issue, if you're the only person of that ilk in the room, then in addition to what you've said, you have to find your voice. Because in a way in that room, you're representing everybody. So be sure not to keep a seat warm. Be sure to find that voice and hone that voice. You talked about that. Be very aware of yourself, but find that voice inside you to represent something, whatever it is, whatever the issue is, so that you make an impression on them. And if you do, you'll be invited back to more. And you can invite some of your friends to more. I think I'm a nurse, so you might say, well, that's easy for me. It's a female-dominated profession. But it's in a healthcare environment where men have a lot of the power. And I found quickly that I was often the only nurse invited to a meeting, and that I would be assigned to those roles unless I found my voice to do something else. And I think that's why I keep getting invited back, as probably does everybody on the stage right now.
This is a very different aspect of this. It makes me realize how lucky I am to work for an organization where I've never encountered those things. That's unbelievable. I have to say that the organization that I work for is really quite female-friendly, very focused on making sure we do the right things by diversity. And it's what I grew up in. It's what I know. What I just wanted to call out that's interesting is in that world where there are a number of women executives over time, and they were my role models, and over time it was normal as their jobs got more and more demanding that they would do as I ultimately did, and that was their husband would be the one to step away from his career, be home, and be the Mr. Mom. And that's normal in my work world. I find in my social world in town, it's a bit of a rarity, and it's cute, and it's funny. What's that? That's weird, and I get really resentful about that. Because again, that's its own form of discrimination. Why? Why is it any different? And I have 2 daughters, and it's their normal too. And again, it's all relative to me. I can name 4 different really wonderful women that were my role models who did the exact same thing, and countless male executives do that thing, and nobody thinks twice about their wife stepping away. And so I would just say it happens in all kinds of forms, and I get very indignant on my husband's behalf when they say, oh, isn't that cute, and oh, is he going to go back to work now, that and it's like, wait a minute. So you gotta be aware it happens in other ways as well.
I'll just add one thing. Growing up in the banking world, traditionally all male, and in every job I had, especially early on, I was always the first female. So I experienced this gender. And fortunately, the companies I was with were always looking to promote women, and oh, here's a live one. Let's give her a shot at this. She's a rarity. Let's see what she can do. And there was a particular time I became a branch manager in Cranston, Rhode Island, which is very ethnic, heavy Italian, and it was the word on the street that this new young woman was there, and how well will she do? So it did inspire me to really show I could do it. But one thing, to all the women in the group, I think, and this might be a little bit of a stereotype, but I think oftentimes when we're asked to do something, we think, I don't know if I can do it. You know, like, I'm not 100% sure. Like, let me think about it. I like the comfortable place that I am right now. And I think men, my male peers, would be like, go for it, like jump right in. So I would say if someone taps you on the shoulder and thinks you're ready, don't doubt yourself. Just jump in and say yes, be brave. I think that's really important.
Excellent, ladies. So I'd like to, is there more?
Well, I was just going to share a story about maybe setbacks and not to let people discourage you, but this one particular story was when I was much younger and starting out in my career, and I was sent out to go meet with a prospective client. And I was raised by a mom and a military dad, and I was always taught to have a very strong, firm handshake, and that was very important in our family. And I can remember I went out and I met the client, and I did what my dad had taught me, have a good, firm handshake. And the feedback from the client was, we will not do business with a woman who has a handshake like that because there's something wrong with her. So I was actually taken off the account, and I was never allowed to. This was not New Hampshire. And then I remember I had to go to the boss of the company who I was working for. It was a production company, and I had to shake his hand and show how I shook hands. And he said, well, maybe you want to tone it down a little bit. And I haven't. And to this day, I go out, and if I shake someone's hand, I shake your hand. And I've written an article about it. And I really think that you should be who you are, and you shouldn't apologize. And it was one of those pinnacle moments that stayed with me is, we are who we are. And if you have a firm handshake, you should be proud of it. If you have brown hair or red hair or whomever you are, you should be proud of it and embrace it. But don't let other people tell you who you should be, because you know who you should be.
Excellent. So the next guy I want to talk to, many of you talked about mentorship along the way. And I think, Linda, you said making your way through your careers, you should find a mentor. So my question is, how does a woman go about finding a mentor, and what makes a good mentor-mentee relationship?
Yep, that's a great question. I am a firm believer in having a mentor. So, any students here, do you have mentors? How many people have mentors? Uh-oh, you better get one. I was really fortunate in my situation in the high-tech industry. I had a woman that I worked for about 12 years, and she was excellent. And the reason I thought of her as my mentor, it was somebody that I aspired to be like. She was ethical, she was honest, she was hardworking, and I thought, you know what, that's what I want to stand for. You know, that's who I want to be. So I always feel as though that's a really important part of my growth as a person in business, and I've mentored staff that I have, because I feel like it's a very important, particularly women in business. I think it's a really important factor in growth, and I'm passionate about mentorships. I mean, we have a great, we call it even though it's an internship program in our company, it's a mentorship program. We really want to see women and students grow as individuals and professionals in their careers, and we want to help them along the way. So I guess if I was to give anybody any advice, I would say find somebody who you really look up to, who can help you grow as a person, professionally and personally. I think it's just a wonderful experience.
Does your mentor have to be a woman?
I don't think so. No, I do not feel as though that's the case. I feel though as though if you can find somebody who, you know, you really look up to, because, and we talked a lot today about be yourself. Sometimes when you're 20 or, I mean, I have college children, you know, you don't necessarily know exactly who you are quite yet. However, you may know what you would like to be, or who you would like to be, or how you would like to be. So it's those types of things that you would look for in a mentor.
Show of hands from these ladies. How many of you had a mentor somewhere along your career that helped you? And showing from the audience, how many of you had a mentor somewhere along the way? Okay. So, Jerry-Ann, you wanted to comment?
Well, I just wanted to add a little bit to the notion of a mentor, because sometimes it's really hard to find a mentor. And if you're going a non-traditional route in your career, it's even harder. The nonprofit word is kind of hard. So you really have to go out and make those connections. I know for me, the first grant I wrote was a horror show. And if it wasn't for Debbie Schachter at the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, you know, I really wouldn't have known what it is to write a grant. So she helped me. But I think one of the things that you have to do if you're really searching for a mentor is you've got to do some research. You've got to sit down. You've got to look up who is doing what you would like to be doing, see who they are. Even if you don't know them, read their bio. That helps you see how they did what they did. And then you have to be not afraid to go and meet with people who are doing what you're doing. You've got to call them. You've got to go in and say, just develop these networks. And without a network, it's really hard. So you have to do that work to create a network.
And I would encourage young people, it can be scary to go approach someone, and I can remember thinking, there's no way I'm important or cool enough to go talk to that person. And you would be shocked at how receptive people are. I really think that human beings in general, we love to help other human beings. And if you approach someone and say, hey, I'm really curious, or I liked what you said, or I found your career path fascinating, I bet they would be so honored and touched and would love to help you. And I think it just takes opening up and having the courage to step forward and say, could I talk to you for a few minutes? Would you like to have a cup of coffee? Could I just email you and get your advice? And they would be honored to help you. And you just have to have that initial courage to say, we're all human beings. It's okay to approach anybody, no matter what level they're on. And I'm sure that they would love to hear from you and would try to help you to the best that they can.
Now, Maureen, you have a unique role on the panel for being the person who was the founder of Families in Transition. So here it is, you know, you were in, I believe, in education, and you decided upon helping people, families in transition. And as the founder, being now recognized as a leader, not just a leader in your organization, but a leader in the community for helping families. Can you talk a little bit about how you got on that journey and rose up the ranks?
Sure. It was all an accident, and none of it was by design. And I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, mentors. I feel like I have a heat-seeking missile on just really finding people who do the next right thing, people who I think are smart, people who I think are ethical, and I just watch them, and I feel like that's a lot of the reason for the success at Families in Transition. And when I first started, I had no clue that Families in Transition would turn into what it is today.
Can you tell everybody a little bit, what is it?
Sure. We provide housing and services to homeless families and individuals in Manchester, Concord, and Dover. And when I first started, Stephanie, I'm going to say this. When I first started, it was 5 women, their children, and myself. Stephanie's with me. She's been working with me for 18 years. It was 5 women, their children, and myself. And today we house over 200 families. We have a couple hundred units of housing. We have about $25 million worth of assets. And what's really cool about that is it's all permanently set aside for the very poor. We also have for-profit businesses to help support what we do. When I first started, I was too shy to even speak, never mind run an organization and have the staff that we do. But what I think the key to success was that I was very curious. I was willing to listen. I was willing to hire people who were way smarter than me. And I wasn't afraid to ask and say, I don't know. So it has been an awesome, wild ride. And I started out here and I ended over here. And it has just been an awesome, wild ride. Honestly, I had no clue it would end up where it is today.
Thank you. Now, one question I wanted to ask is, although I'm a New Hampshire native, not everyone here or probably in the audience are New Hampshire natives, but there's something very unique I find about New Hampshire. And I wanted to ask anybody who cares to respond to that, is there anything unique about New Hampshire in what you do or your ability to rise to a leadership position?
Can I just say one thing?
Sure thing.
New Hampshire is a small town. And the longer you're in it, the smaller it gets. And to me, life is about connections. And I have found that people are more than willing and wanting to help. You just need to let them know how.
Yeah, there's definitely this feeling in New Hampshire that you can do and accomplish just about anything. I think it's a special place. For the winery in particular, it was easy to want to situate LaBelle Winery in New Hampshire because we're so unique. So that gives us this little edge in New Hampshire. People say, a winery in New Hampshire? Like, you know, this isn't Napa. So for me, I feel like, no, I'm not in wine country, but New Hampshire's given me a home for my business that makes us a unique player in a very crowded market, and that's been very helpful to me. But also, in New Hampshire, you have this ability to develop these wonderful networks of people, like all of the women here on this stage, and it's a very supportive community, you know. So once you kind of can get plugged into that community and start to draw on all of the talents and all of the amazing benefits of the wonderful people in New Hampshire, and you know, you develop partnerships with wonderful people. I see some of my partners in the audience. The McGowan Fine Art Gallery is one of them. You know, you develop these wonderful partnerships, and there's this openness and willingness of businesses to work together that makes it a very special place, I think, to start a business.
Anyone else on New Hampshire?
Yeah, I agree very much with Amy. When I started my business, I really didn't know how I was going to start my business and get the business, so probably I decided that I would maybe tap some friends and try to get some business that way. And it's amazing how helpful and how individuals in this state do want to help you grow and help you succeed in business. And for me, I grew slowly, but consistently, but it's been a great experience, and it's very self-satisfying. It's very powerful, and I would strongly recommend it for anybody who has the desire to have their own business.
Everybody wants to say.
I'm from Connecticut, and I came here for the job many years ago, and I went back to my high school reunion a couple of years ago. We don't need to know how many. And I remember a lot of the women who were there, where do you live? And the people lived all over in San Francisco, New York, and they'd gone on and done different things. And where do you live? Well, I live in New Hampshire. I'm up in New Hampshire. You live in Cow Hampshire? How do you survive? And I remember being shocked because New Hampshire has so much to offer. And to what the other women are saying up here, to the people who really want to help and assist, and the fact that it is really just a small community where everyone does know each other. We also have this wonderful presidential primary that positions us into this prime place every 4 years, and incredible connections. I mean, New Hampshire really is in the national spotlight, and I like to think of New Hampshire as having so many rich and wonderful opportunities that aren't available in other states. And in addition to that, I also like to think of it as just sort of a community that's a great big hug.
Myra?
Just a little twist on that. I think this is the 6th place I've lived, no, the 7th. And what's unique about New Hampshire to me, besides what everybody has talked about, which I agree is true, is there's this love of homegrown in New Hampshire. So I often say to people, I live in Meredith, and I say to people when they come to visit, there are no chain hotels in Meredith, New Hampshire. There are none. So you can go on to hotels.com, and you're not going to find them because they're unique to New Hampshire. And that means that it's a great place to be an entrepreneur, because you don't have to follow the national trends. There's not vanilla in New Hampshire. There are lots of different flavors in this ice cream store. And that's really embraced in New Hampshire. In fact, I think the big monolith corporation is not particularly welcomed in New Hampshire, but homegrown is. So that, there you can sort of do anything, and it's a great laboratory to try things.
Now, ladies, audience, but Jordan, ladies, any questions from you? We can keep going? All right.
Can I just add?
Question?
Speaking about being a woman in a male-dominated environment, I actually was a public information officer in the Navy. So, can y'all hear me? So not only is it difficult to be a woman in the military, but the Navy especially, because women are women are more prevalent in taking shore positions than being out on sea.
And this dates me because that was 30 years ago, and now women are very much on ship. They're now in combat roles. But trying to break the ice or the glass ceiling in the military, it was and is an extremely difficult challenge and opportunity. And Tiffany, I'm an Army brat too. So not only did I grow up in the military, but I also wore my country's uniform as well. Don't know how many people here actually served or know someone who served, but the military in and of itself is quite different. But I'm so happy to see women getting more roles in the military and having that opportunity to serve in leadership roles. There isn't anything more compelling or challenging than serving your country and then being in a combat situation. And God bless.
All right, I think we had a question in the back. Thank you.
I have a question. I mean, I think some of us are old enough to remember the 80s and those funny little ties and, you know, women kind of coming in and being, I think, encouraged to have management styles that were very male. And so I'm encouraged to see so many women rising to the top because I'm thinking it must be changing management styles in a way that you know, is good for everybody. And I'm wondering if the panel could talk a little bit about ways that you've seen change or ways that you see potential for change.
Yes, I remember that John
T. Malloy, Dress for Success, right? With the white blouse and the bow tie. So my first boss at the bank was
My first boss was a woman, and she was really tough. I mean, the language that she used, I mean, she was one of the guys, right? She wanted to fit in. And I remember that we had an event, and a bunch of tellers were going, and she goes, "Oh, Kathy, I don't go to those." And I'm like, "You don't go to those?" She's like, "Oh, no, the tellers would feel comfortable talking to me." I'm like, "Well, that's ridiculous, right? They work for you. I mean, you've got to be part of the team." So I think that's changed big time. I think people now feel comfortable being themselves, and I think they're respected for that. So I've seen a big change.
Heather?
I think we're heading towards more change as well because in our schools our business programs and so on are mostly women. Women far outnumber men in college now. And the more roles you see women have, the more executive roles, it has to change. Because there's certain things that we can't change. The female dynamics will be different than what the male dynamics are. So our companies just will have to change because that's what happens when you bring different people to the table. You know, you see change.
And I'll add that I think, at least in healthcare, which is the industry I'm in, that having more women at senior levels has both civilized the workplace and created more teamwork. Because it's not a top-down strategy, it's a let's gather around the best heads in the room and decide what the best strategy will be. And you know, it's interesting, my father was a Fortune 500 CEO. And I grew up, I was born in 1956, so I grew up when the world was changing. And I can remember him saying something to me. He actually was nervous about having women enter senior management at his corporation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But he told me afterwards, it had such a positive effect. It made the workplace a far more civilized and thoughtful place with much more considered decisions than it had ever been. So maybe I had a good father who taught me that that's the way it should be. But I've also seen in my own industry that the presence of women in the workplace creates much more of a team environment. And the decisions are not only better decisions, they're more supported by everybody else in the organization.
Now, what I would like to do this evening is to have one final question. We're getting close to the closing time. And you know that we called this program making it our business, sharing our stories to empower change. And as I thought about what we were going to question tonight, I came across a quote by Bill Gates that says, as we look into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others, which is really why you're all here tonight. And I was hoping you could answer the following question. In looking back, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? Or, if you prefer, what advice do you have for women making their way through their careers now? And if we could perhaps go around and try to get an answer from everybody?
I don't know. That was 20 years ago. When I was 20 years old, was so long ago, I don't know what I would have said. But I think I would say be brave and trust your gut and move forward.
Sharon?
I'm glad I'm at this end, because by the time it gets down there, it's going to be tough. Because Margaret already said what I was going to say, which is that finding your voice thing, which I'm going to say in my own way. Sometimes I still do that now, and I get so mad at myself. When you're sitting in a meeting or something, and you have this like great thought, and you kind of don't say it, or you delay saying it, and then someone else says it, and you're like, I should have just said that. So I so wish I had done that more when I was younger, because I realize now that I was not necessarily spot on every time, but definitely, you know, right in there. And I wish I had started doing that earlier, because I feel like I'm doing what I want to do now, but I just think about if I had done that every time at every stage, my confidence level would have been so great so early. So I would encourage any age person, if you're thinking something and you're in the conversation and you're at the table, to participate and say it and be part of it.
Amy.
So, two things. I guess I would encourage you as young people in the audience to save your money. And, uh-oh, sorry. We would encourage you to save your money. Because it's so empowering. I don't come from a family with a lot of money. I often ask my parents if they have a trust fund waiting for me, but they do not. And so, you know, I had to self-fund my dreams. And so that caused me to be very disciplined at an early age. And I started saving very early, even though I had debt. I mean, I had a lot of loan debt and a lot of college debt. But I still saved. So I paid the debt, but I was able to squirrel, even if it's $100 or 10, you know, whatever it is, just save your money. It gives you a lot of options later. Now that means you have to make a decision for success early, because that's going to inform all of your decision making. So that means, you know, you're going to have to make choices about what you spend on. And that means you probably can't be maybe as frivolous as your friends. I don't know. So, you know, because I can remember some of those hard decisions. But I was happy to save the money because it gave me the options later. The other thing I would say is to not, if I was talking to my younger self, one thing I did when I was young was I worried too much about hoping that people I worked for liked me. Oh, I'm sorry. So Betsy and I also... so that's so interesting that we have all these commonalities, because I think as a young person, it's obviously important to be likable. I mean, you don't want to be somebody that nobody wants to work with because you're hell on wheels, but being likable has to be secondary to just doing excellent work. So own your work. Know what the heck you're doing. Do a great job at it, and they're going to like you. And don't worry about your likability factor. Just do great work.
Really? So I really was going to say to my 21-year-old self, put more money in your 401k. That's what I wish I said to my... I said, do you know how much that compounds? Seriously. It's terrible. So that's my 21-year-old advice. But for general advice, I struggled with trying to think about that one. But here's what I would say. Don't sell yourself short. I remember looking at people I admired, especially once they started to sort of recognize me and say, hey, we think you could be doing this job someday. And I thought, they're different than me. I'm just me. You know, they're different. There's something different about them. And everyone is a mix of confidence and insecurity. And I agree with what someone said, I think Kathy, about just go for it. If someone comes to you and says, hey, how'd you like to try this? You don't have to be an order taker. If it's not right for you and it's just not in your heart, that's different. But say yes. if you say yes more than you say no, if you take on what's in front of you, put your head down and do a good job, chances are things are going to take care of themselves. And don't sell yourself short. You're not the only person in the world that wonders if you can really do it when you get thrown into 200 feet of water. Just, sort of have faith in yourself.
Well, I agree with so much of what's already been said, and I guess I think about when I was 21, I wish somebody had told me to put me first, which is kind of a variation on the theme, because I was raised to take care of everybody else. And even though you might end up being the caretaker, which I think is a lovely role in life, if you do it with the mindfulness about your own place in that, I think you can, I don't know, I guess just feel like you're making better decisions about what to do next. The other thing that I would say is really, to sort of try and figure out what might be transformational for you. For me, it was travel. When I started traveling, it completely changed my worldview. And I didn't, all my friends went to Europe junior year of college, and I went to Central America, and there was just something about that just, it was such a different world. And I think we talk so much in business about, thinking up here and being strategic in that 30,000-foot view. And I think if you don't move around the world, your worldview is pretty small. So I think that's my advice.
I have one, thank you. I wish I was 21 again. This is pretty darn good advice. And I do have a 21-year-old, and she's not in this audience. So if anything I say is worthwhile, would you text her and tell her that her mother said something worthwhile? I actually have two things. One of them is don't compare yourself to other people who are your friends. Please don't do that. Don't say they're making it, they got this great job, they're in this great relationship, oh, they're moving to this great city. It's your life. You're not living their life. You're living your life. And life is long, and you have a lot of opportunity along the way. So I guess my second part is life is not linear. What you start doing when you get out of college doesn't have to be what you're doing when you're 40 years old. You can make lots of changes as long as, and that's, Amy's the perfect example of that. But there are lots of opportunities that present themselves, and I really do believe that you carry the skill set, and along the way you learn who you are. And when you learn who you are, you learn, no, it's your daughter. It's your daughter. I like to say Margaret, that was really smart. But anyway, the point is it's not linear. It's not like there are 3 doors and you have to pick the right one and the rest of your life follows that. You have lots of opportunity along the way if you'll open your eyes to it.
That was excellent. I will, I'll tell her. I guess my thinking is if there's a career path that you're looking to go down, try to find something that you love or like, and that may take some time. And I think once you latch on to something, you're not always going to love it, but once you latch on to something that fits you as a person, become great at it. Become an expert. Become a superhero, a star, and really try to be at the top of your game with that thing that you love. Because I think when you're younger, you do want to be a jack of all trades. I wanted to be like a singer. It's like, you do? You want to try that? We could have a band. Okay. So I think once you find something, just hang on to it and grow with it and learn as much about it as you can, and then everything else will follow. That's how I feel. So
I agree with everything all of these wonderful women have said. I would say own your setbacks and your failures. Don't let them own you. The very first time I ever tried to be on camera was the most incredible flaming disaster you can ever possibly imagine. And I remember even showing my mom my tape of, look, it's my first time trying to be on camera. And she said, Tiffany, maybe you should think about doing something else. But it was really, she was being honest, and it was bad, and she loves me, and she's a really good mom. I don't want you to, I love you, Mom. But I would just say, make sure that you don't give up, because we all have so much to offer, and make sure that you listen to yourself. You know what you can do. Nobody else knows what you can do, only you, and you know here in your heart and in your gut. And I would say every single time I've ever made a decision that went against my gut, I've always come back to regret it. And now I use that horrible disaster that was my fledgling attempt at being on camera to hopefully help other people if they want to speak publicly or do something else. So it all comes full circle, so don't give up.
We're getting to the end of the line. I'm really sorry.
I hope you don't
Oh, God. Really, what I have to say is that really take the time to know who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and these things grow and change as we get up. But not to be afraid of that growth. It's really important to know what makes you tick, where you draw the line, what your integrity rides on. Because it's not only for yourself, but it's how you come out and are seen to the people, that you're working for, that you may be helping. If you don't have that integrity, you're not believable. So that's what I'd say. Know where you draw the line.
Phew. A couple things. One would be, don't ever let somebody tell you that you can't, ever. That was so important to me in my youth and in my adulthood. The second is be eager, and by that I mean eager to find out, to question, to learn. And this whole experience that I had at Families in Transition, I felt like a duck. On the front, on the top of that, I look like I know what I'm doing. Underneath, I'm paddling like hell, and I'm paddling because I want to know, and I was eager. And I was curious, and I really feel like those two things, if you have those two things, you can just do just about anything.
I don't need that. So what do you think? Amazing women who have shared themselves with us to help to empower change. So let's give them all a round of applause. Some thank yous. A program like this would never take place without a lot of hard work and dedication. Susan Damari, Director of Marketing from the McLean Law Firm, as well as Marianne Manugian, were highly instrumental in this happening. Ariel Wilson and Matt Wood here at the school helping to do the videotape and to do all of this. These women taking their time not on one night but on 2 occasions to come together and pull this all together. So hopefully for the women in the audience, they did share something that can help you as you start your careers, those of you who are students, make your way through your careers, and even for the men in the audience to understand that your partnership and mentorship is very important as women find their way in the business or nonprofit world. So I thank you for your attendance, and I don't know, Marianne, if you have anything else.
I just want to also thank you all for attending this evening. I wish I could bring you all home. Do you have any food? I have a 19-year-old son who probably has not made dinner tonight. Yeah, but this has been an amazing journey, and I also, Linda, I just want to thank you for coming.